going to start the evening by introducing you to our moderator, Pastor Glenn Orr. Reverend Glenn Orr is a former electronic warfare senior chief petty officer in the U.S. Navy who, after 17 years of service, left the military to pursue full-time ministry. He was licensed to preach in 1992 by 2nd Calvary Baptist Church in Norfolk, Virginia, where Reverend Jeffrey Guns is the pastor, and in the same year, he entered seminary at Virginia Union University in Richmond, Virginia. After graduation in 1995, he was ordained as a minister in the Baptist church tradition. For the next 5 years, his primary ministry focus was teaching for the Virginia Union University Evans Smith Christian Leadership Institute in Norfolk, Virginia. In the year 2000, he responded to an opportunity to pastor a church and joined Emmanuel A.M.E. Church in Portsmouth, Virginia, where he received his training for itinerant eldership in the African Methodist Episcopal Church tradition. After obligating himself to follow the A.M.E. doctrine and discipline in 2001, he was ordained as an elder in 2003 and became the pastor of St. Paul A.M.E. Church in Blacksburg. After commuting from Virginia Beach every weekend, good gracious, for 16 months, Reverend Orr moved to Blacksburg and was fortunate enough to be admitted to the Virginia Tech University, where he is pursuing a PhD in public administration and policy. Since his arrival, Reverend Orr has co-founded and serves as the chair for the New River Valley Interdenominational Ministers Alliance, and he is a founding member of the New Mountain Climbers Giving Circle. He is a member of the Community Group of Montgomery County and a graduate research assistant at the Virginia Tech Transportation Institute. He is a man of God, called to serve the church and the community. Please join me in welcoming Pastor Orr and our panelists.
Good evening. Good evening. I want to say thank you for coming, and I appreciate your patience with that lengthy introduction, but I need you to hear my story. And that's what we're here for this evening. We're going to tell the story as we know our parts of the story of St. Paul A.M.E. Church. And so I want to introduce the primary panel. Actually, these are the historians of St. Paul here. To my immediate left, Jacqueline Eves is our historian. She's also the steward pro tem at St. Paul. Next to Jacqueline is Reverend Archie Richmond, former elder in the First Episcopal District, New Jersey Conference. And to the far end, definitely not the least of us, is Miss Patricia Berger. Many of you know, our head trustee and songbird. Amen. Mother of the church as well. So we do praise God because we're people of God, so we're going to sound like people of God up here, and that's going to help me get through this a little bit better, all right? All right, so let me just say a few things about our topic. What I'll do is I'll give some general A.M.E. Tradition and ministry information as I know it. As you heard in the intro, I'm not born and raised in the A.M.E. tradition, so I'll give some general background, and then the specific information about St. Paul will come from our panelists. I also will read an excerpt from a book written by Richard Allen, our founder, and after that reading, I'll ask that Reverend Richmond share. All right? The points I want to make in this topic about the tradition, the vision and sharing the faith at St. Paul. First of all, we're celebrating 150 years this year. Founded in 1857. A lot of people say 1857, that's a long time ago. Yeah, and we don't have a lot of details about 1857, by the way. But we do know one thing that really is part of the vision that stays with me. As I was looking to see what kind of things were happening in 1857, I discovered there was a great revival in the country in 1857. And I really feel like St. Paul is a part of that great revival, where they said about 50,000 people a week were being saved. And the unique thing about it is the way the revival took off, it was led by laymen, lay leaders. It was not a clergy-led revival, and it was led by prayer meetings. And oddly enough, we've started a noonday prayer meeting this week for the Lent season, and I just thought it was very fitting that the 1857 revival was led by noonday prayer meetings where lay leaders got together. The other thing that's important to remember about the A.M.E. Church in St. Paul is that lay leaders do a lot of the work. They're a big part of the history because the itinerancy involves preachers coming and going, which is another reason why it's tough to know, kind of pin down the first pastor. You have it's kind of like the synoptic gospels, you know what I'm saying? Everybody's got a point of view, but they're telling the same story, all right? And so we get a little fuzzy on the details of the first pastor and what have you, because at that time, the Virginia Conference had not even been formed yet. The Virginia Conference was formed 10 years after St. Paul was founded. And so there was no pastoral assignment per se at that time. It's also important to remember that that here at St. Paul, we find ourselves connected to Blacksburg United Methodist Church. And so some of you who know the history of Blacksburg United Methodist Church, you may have read the very fine piece in the journal of the historic journal here in Smithville. I'm not even remember the name of it, but you see it out on the table, right? And that one gives you some history of St. Paul too. And so at this time, I'm going to read the part I have from Richard Allen, written to give us an idea of how the A.M.E. Church started. And then we're going to ask Reverend Richmond to share with us. And we'll take time in between the sharing to see if there are any questions. And I've got my very able and dependable and lovable assistant, Sister Lisa Tabor, will be manning the mic for anybody who has comments. We're told that you have to speak into the mic. Amen. And she'll be a preacher, a deacon, ordained this year. So, good. It's good work going on at St. Paul. All right. I established prayer meetings. I raised a society in 1786 of 42 members. I saw the necessity of erecting a place of worship for the colored people. I proposed it to the most respectable people of color in this city, but here I met with opposition. I had but 3 colored brethren that united with me in erecting the place of worship: the Reverend Absalom Jones, William White, and Doris Jennings. These united with me as soon as it became public and known by the elder who was stationed in the city. The Reverend C.B. opposed the plan and would not submit to any argument we could raise, but he was shortly removed from the charge. Reverend Mr. W. took the charge, and Reverend L.G. Mr. W. was much opposed to the African church and used very degrading and insulting language to us to try and prevent us from going on. We all belonging to St. George's Church, Reverend Absalom Jones, William White, Doris Jennings, we felt ourselves much cramped. But my dear Lord was with us, and we believed it was his will the work would go on, and that we would be able to succeed in building the house of the Lord. We established prayer meetings and meetings of exhortation, and the Lord blessed our endeavors, and many souls were awakened. But the elders soon forbid us holding any such meetings, but we viewed the forlorn state of our colored brethren, and that they were destitute of a place to worship. They were considered as a nuisance. A number of us usually attended St. George's Church in 4th Street, and when the colored people began to get numerous in attending the church, they moved us from the seats we usually sat on and placed us around the wall. And on the Sabbath morning, we went to church, and the sexton stood at the door and told us to go into the gallery. He told us to go, and we would not see where we would sit. We would see where we would sit. We expected to take the seats over the ones we had formerly occupied, not knowing any better. We took those seats. Meeting had begun, and they were nearly done singing, and just as we got to the seats, the elder said, "Let us pray." We had not been long on our knees before I heard considerable scuffling and low talking. I raised my head up and saw one of the trustees, H.M., having hold of the Reverend Absalom Jones, pulling him up off his knees and saying, "You must get up. You must not kneel here." Mr. Jones replied, "Wait until prayer is over." Mr. H.M., having hold of the Reverend Absalom Jones, pulling him up, said, "No, you must get up now, or I will call for aid and I will force you away." Mr. Jones said, "Wait until prayer is over and I will get up and trouble you no more." With that, he beckoned to one of the trustees, Mr. L.S., to come to his assistance. He came and went to William White to pull him up. By this time, prayer was over, and we all went out of the church in a body, and they were no more plagued with us in the church. This raised a great excitement and inquiry among the citizens, insomuch that they believed they were ashamed of their conduct. But my dear Lord was with us, and we were filled with fresh vigor to get a house erected to worship God in. Seeing our forlorn and distressed situation, many of the hearts of our citizens were moved to urge us forward, notwithstanding. We had subscribed largely towards finishing St. George's Church, in building the gallery and laying new floors, and just as the house was made comfortable, we were turned out from enjoying the comforts to worship therein. We then hired a storeroom and held worship by ourselves. Here we were pursued with threats of being disowned and read publicly out of meeting if we did not continue to worship in the place we had hired. But we believed the Lord would be our friend. We got subscription papers out to raise money, build the house of the Lord, and by this time we had waited on Dr. Rush and Mr. Robert Ralston and told them of our distressing situation. We considered it a blessing that the Lord had put it in our hearts to wait upon those gentlemen. They pitied our situation and subscribed largely towards the church and were very friendly toward us and advised us on how to go on. We appointed Mr. Ralston our treasurer. Dr. Rush did much for us in public by his influence, and I hope the name of Dr. Benjamin Rush and Mr. Robert Ralston will never be forgotten among us. They were the two first gentlemen who espoused the cause of the oppressed and aided us in building the house of the Lord for the poor Africans to worship in. Here was the beginning and rise of the first African church in America. Reverend Richmond.
To kind of summarize some of the many points that were brought out is that the African Methodist Episcopal Church goes back to 1787. As has been said, they came out of St. George United Methodist Church. The objective was to search for freedom of worship because they did not have the freedom they desired to worship at St. George Church in Philadelphia. So on the day that they left St. George, a large group left with them. Mr. Jones went one way and Richard Allen went another way. And Richard Allen began, as has been said, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But Richard Allen was a very clever guy, a very humble person, because he didn't go out with anger. He went out with love and continued to care for the people that associated with. In fact, after he had been licensed to preach, he continued to preach at St. George Church. And the story goes, well, it's true that a lot of people would come to hear him preach early in the morning when they wouldn't come to hear others preach. And 1787, as you look at it from historical perspective, that was before the war between the states ended. And, excuse me, and Richard Allen was very instrumental in doing a lot of things in the city of Philadelphia. He started the first evening school for colored people in Philadelphia. He started quite a few business for, well, I shouldn't say black people, they were called colored people then. You know, we were called colored for a long time, and then they called us Negroes, and then we got tired of being Negroes, and then Stoker Carmichael coined the phrase black, so we became black, and now we're African Americans. But they were called colored people in those days. But Richard Allen was very industrious. During the yellow fever in Philadelphia, Richard Allen was one of the key persons who went out when others were afraid to go out and help people who were ill and sick. But Richard Allen and a lot of his friends went out in Philadelphia, regardless of whether they were white or black, and did an awful lot in the area of helping people to recuperate from the yellow fever. But Richard Allen was just one of those aggressive persons who happened to be the first bishop of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so we've had a rich legacy And the fact that we continue to grow, and once the African Methodist Episcopal Church started in Philadelphia, they began to spring up all over the country. Dry Delaware, and Richard Allen did a lot of preaching over 2 or 3 states after he was licensed to preach and became the first bishop, of course. So that's just a little bit of the history about the church that you would like to think about. If you think about St. Paul locally, then you can project that in connection with the history of the A.M.E. Church nationally.
Yes, sir. Now, you shared with me some things about what it was like when you became pastor.
Yes. I came to Blacksburg in 1952 as a student pastor from Raleigh, North Carolina. That was before some of the young people here were born. But it was a wonderful journey. The people were lovely. We had about 52 active members, by 72 on the roll, but 52 were active. That was a large number for St. Paul in those days. And it was exciting time, to say the least, for me. I was young, at the age of 22, kind of halfway frightened, didn't know what I was doing, but came into town on a Greyhound bus on a Saturday afternoon. It was the second Sunday, Sister Bergen, in May, Mother's Day. My first sermon was preached on Mother's Day. And it was a good beginning for St. Paul, because they were well established. Jackie's dad was there, and Patricia's parents were active in the church and community. But an awful lot of work needed to be done. They'd had older senior ministers there. And this young fellow came in as the pastor of St. Paul, and it was a new beginning. But after 1 month, we really got together, began to plan a lot of short-range and long-range programs. One of the things that we began in 1962 was a good stewardship program with some equity in it. The kind of financial program we had was not exactly the kind that you were proud of from equity, treating all people alike. There were some members of the church who had relatively good income, some of the men especially, and a lot of the ladies had menial jobs, and a lot of them had to walk from Newtown, if you know where Newtown, all the way across town. They didn't even have cars. But they had policy in the church that everybody paid $2 a month on the building fund. We were trying to do some building. And I thought that was kind of out of proportion to have everybody pay the same thing. So after a short while, about a month or two, I talked with them about the feasibility of changing it so that the ones who were in a larger income would pay more. And much to my surprise, they accepted it because they realized that it was the right thing to do. And we began to grow financially from that. And the next thing we felt that we had to do was bridge the gap between the young and the old. Jackie, I think, was about, let's see, well, Jackie was about 5 years old then. And but we had a large number of young people. I mean, we had large groups, Reverend Gore, of young people, children. And we began a Bible class in the afternoon on Sunday. And they came from all over the city, not just St. Paul, but they came from the Black Baptist Church here and other communions. We had a good time on a Sunday afternoon, and of course they felt that I was one of them often. I remember one Sunday afternoon they would look for me to start service at 7 o'clock. In those days you had 2 services every Sunday in the church. And I was out playing croquet with the young people, the people in the church waiting on me. But it was an awful lot to do. Both objectives in stewardship and bringing the people together was for a very good cause that we might grow and go together. Our long-range goal was to see our people become more communally involved in activities. We were up there, St. Paul, by ourselves. See, in the early 1950s, and let me read this paragraph because it's very germane to where we came from as a community of people and being involved in activities of the entire community. So in the early 1950s, the culture in Blacksburg was typical of its time. Segregation was the law of the land. Thus, many doors were closed to blacks. We could not eat in restaurants. We could not sleep in hotels. We could not even go on the campus unless we worked on the campus. So we were rather confined to a very small area. In fact, some of the earliest business that were owned by blacks, we had a couple of black barbershops used to cut hair for blacks in the evenings, not during the daytime. They were segregated too. They cut the students' hair on the campus, and they weren't there to let the blacks in during the daytime. They were members of my church, though, St. Paul. But it's just the way things were in those days. It just wasn't what we liked. And we had a very comprehensive vision for our church to become involved in every phase of community life, but our vision could not be achieved in a segregated system. They had limited our participation by being a segregated area as Blacksburg was in those days. We had hoped and had patience and prayed for the time that our Lord would open doors where we could all go into a different type of community life, where we could have more opportunities and enjoy some of the more abundant things that people ought to enjoy in every community. The white communities of Blacksburg and Montgomery County were silent about the plight of blacks until the Carter Memorial Park case in 1955. Now, this was a turning point of things that changed in Blacksburg and Christiansburg and surrounding areas. In 1955, about 50 of us in our church went to Carter Memorial Park for a picnic on a Sunday afternoon. And there's two parts, one part for the colored, another part for the white. You know, those days it had signs, like they had for colored, in some areas for colored water fountains, black water, and white water fountains. So they gave us an opportunity to go into the area that wasn't well kept, stay where we were in the area was designed and designated for whites. And we kind of enjoyed it there. The grass was cut, everything was clean and neat. So we refused to go in the other part they had for colored people. And it ended up that I was arrested in 1955. I went to jail and stayed in jail for about 3 hours. Some of my officers came and posted bond, which was $500. And that was kind of advanced in that day and time. That was before the Rosa Parks case. That was before Martin Luther King. But it was a time of crisis for me and our people, because all the people at St. Paul wanted the same thing that I wanted. We wanted to project ourselves in the community. We wanted better jobs, better opportunities, better facilities. We wanted to do all the other things that everybody else in this community enjoyed. So to make a long story short, kind of summarize it, they had a trial of this particular case, Carter Memorial Park, a few months thereafter. And the NAACP took the case. The lawyer out of Richmond, Virginia, the head lawyer for the NAACP, Lawyer Hill, accepted the case. And it was after the Supreme Court had declared it was illegal to segregate in the state park. But the local people still wanted, kept like it used to be way back. And it's natural that we were on the right side, so when you know your right stand, and we won the case. So they threw it out of court. A lot of people were there to see this historical case, but they knew that we were legally right by being in the side of the park where we stayed on that Sunday afternoon. Well, that changed a lot of things, because it started people to thinking that the plight of the black people shouldn't be like that in that day and time. And the Ministerial Alliance here in the city of Blacksburg came to my rescue. A person by the name of Dr. Ellison Smythe, some of you who are my age might have known him down through the years. He was a saint. He was a real great pastor in the city of Blacksburg. He pastored Presbyterian Church, and he was a very aggressive person. He never left me out there by myself. He came to visit with me, he and another pastor, and they began to talk about what was the conditions under which we struggled here in the city of Blacksburg. So we began to integrate the Ministerial Association, which was new. And we began that same year to have services together. We had a Thanksgiving service, and they invited me to give the sermon at the Thanksgiving service. And some other things happened that same year. The Presbyterian Church was willing to open their daycare center for black children. And our daughter, older daughter, Charmaine, enrolled in the daycare center. And Dr. Newman, who was the president of VPI at that time, was a strict segregationist. And he resigned from the Presbyterian Church as an elder in the church because the church agreed to let our daughter go to the day school. The same year, lots of things happened. The same year, they kicked the AUW women off the campus. That's a professional organization for women. And my wife, at that particular time, India, was a member of it. And because she became a member, they kicked them off the campus. They could no longer meet on the campus. But there was a catalyst that started a lot of things happening in the Christiansburg, Blacksburg. Some of the people who were very instrumental in working with me was Marianne Madison, who's deceased now. Dr. Norm Grover and Ann Grover were beautiful persons. And quite a few other, those were three of the persons. Among the blacks are Walter Lewis, Jackie's dad, and mother also, and Hunter Bell and Charlie Booth at that particular time. And we organized what was called the Virginia Council on Human Relations, came in and organized us locally here in Blacksburg. So a lot of people began to think of the conditions that black people at St. Paul, as well as the black church, Baptist church. Things just happened, began to happen so quickly. Restaurants began to open up. Other places where we couldn't go were accessible to us. And life began to take on a new meaning in this community. Better job opportunities. And as I look back and think of those 12 years that I was here, oh, by the way, I was principal of school in Christiansburg, elementary school in Christiansburg. And the superintendent kept me off my job when he found out that I was involved in the park case. He would let me come back to work until he got a letter with legal terms that he knew only lawyers could write. And so he told me I could come back to my job, and that wasn't the end of it for me, though. It was a rough year for me. At the end of the year, he refused to renew my contract. But I say that to say this is what projected things that happened in Christiansburg. The pastors in Christiansburg then got together. One person that some of you used to know way back, I know Brother Johnson back then knew him, was Reverend E.A. Bishop. And then the pastor of the Baptist church. They went to the superintendent in my behalf and asked him, had I done my work? He said, yes, done. Work has been perfect. So they told him that in order for them to really be quiet, they would have to give me my contract. Otherwise, they would see a great demonstration in Christiansburg. So Christiansburg people began to get involved. So the Virginia Council on Human Relations spread to Christiansburg and Blacksburg through St. Paul members that somehow elevated a lot of things in a different level where everybody could participate in community activities. Let me stop here.
All right, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. Ms. Burke.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Reynolds-Berger, and I have been in Blacksburg all my life. I feel like I always tell people I'm one of the cornerstones because I was born in Blacksburg, and I've always been a member of St. Paul A.M.E. Church. You know, your past has already been written, and you cannot change it. In its pages, you can find your history. Some pages have soft colors, others have dark shades. Wonderful remembrance of happy times on pages you wish you could tear out forever. Looking back on my life, I recall the family of God and I always put God first. On Sunday mornings, we went to Sunday school at St. Paul A.M.E. Church. We did not have an excuse of going like I had the other day when it snowed. I couldn't get my car out. But we walked, so we didn't have an excuse at that time. If you did not go, you weren't able to do any activities during the following week. We walked to church 3 miles one way, leaving home early in the morning. We had 2 black churches at that time, which in Blacksburg, which we still have 2. And they were First Baptist Clay Street and our St. Paul A.M.E. on Penn Street. Our families also attended St. Paul A.M.E. Church. Reverend Caldwell was our pastor when we first started. Mrs. Gladys Taylor taught Sunday school. Stewardesses were Mrs. Maggie Mays, Mrs. Ethel Vaughn, and Mrs. A.M.E. Johnson. The pianist was Mrs. Rachel Bell. Junior choir, believe it or not, was Myrtle Lewis. Congregation varied, as they say, we had 50 and 60 people. We joined the church when we had a revival that a lady called Sister Thorpe came down, and I was baptized at the age of 7. I am now chairman of the trustee board. I have taught Sunday school and just about everything else at the church. We had freedom, failure, success, and responsibility, and we learned the idea of a parent bailing us out if we broke the law was unheard of because they didn't believe in you breaking the law. They actually sided with the law. Most blacks were quite contented with their lot in life, even if they had to work at a job that whites did not want them to. Many of them owned their own homes, and some blacks had successful careers in the area, in spite of job discrimination. The members at that time, some of the members were Laura Anderson, Nettie Anderson, she was a school teacher. Henry and Mamie Glenn, Henry Glenn was a barber down at Tech. W.J. and Constance Sears, W.J. Sears and his son both were barbers. Hattie Clemens, she was a teacher at CI. Raymond and Gladys Carroll. Raymond Carroll was worked at the cleaners at Virginia Tech, and his wife taught Sunday school at St. Paul. John and Ella Warren and family owned the cleaners and bakery. It's a building right up here on Main Street that the Warrens owned at that time. Fern Drury and family went to the church. Fern played the piano, and her son at one time was a barber down with Mr. Sears, and I think Mr. Johnson may have been there at that time. Not that he may be younger. Anyway, Annie Scott, she was what they call the good soldier, because she always took care of all the white communion tablecloths and all the, at that time the chairs had skirts or whatever on them, and she always made sure they were starched and kept that all nice. Lily Reynolds, she raised me, and she was Jackie's aunt, and she raised me when my mother and father separated when I was 2 years old. And she was one of the good soldiers also. Alonzo and Bessie Freeman and family, they had a business, the cleaners, and they worked at Virginia Tech, the cleaners. Lemuel Owens, he was the treasurer of St. Paul at one time. Gertrude Owens was his sister. They were all members of St. Paul. Buckshot and Elmer Johnson lived in Newtown, and he was Miss Alma was a steward. Preston Mays was a trustee, and Maggie Mays, his wife, was a steward. Hunter and Rachel Bell were members. Rachel Bell was a musician, and Hunter was a steward, a trustee, and he worked for the University Club. Lottie Johnson was a Sunday school teacher. Rice Dobbins was a treasurer, and Elder Dobbins and their family all went to St. Paul. Sidney and Nanny Bell Snail and family, they had a beauty salon down on Jackson Street at one time. Charlie and Catherine Booth, Charlie was a steward, and I think he may have been a trustee at one time also. Walter Lewis was a steward and a trustee and a treasurer at one time. And Myrtle Lewis belonged to the Missionary Society, and as I said, she played the piano for the youth at one time. And their family all went to St. Paul. Patricia Berger, which is me, and my family always went to St. Paul. Zellie Wade and family, and Victoria Saunders, they were all St. Paul people. Look, some of the people that we had at St. Paul always, I don't know, there's something about St. Paul that's just, my life has always been wrapped around St. Paul. I'm 72 years old. But anyway, I'm the oldest one up here, I think. But anyway, St. Paul, if I miss a Sunday at St. Paul, I feel like I've lost a big part of my week. Because like I say, I was always been a member of St. Paul. So in August, we're planning, in the process of planning a 150th anniversary for St. Paul. And you will be hearing more about it because I will be coming to everybody that I can think of and that I can't think of to be a part to make this a great success. Because there's no better place to be on Sunday morning than St. Paul A.M.E. Church.
Right. Thank you, Ms. B. Jackie.
Okay, well, you know my name. My name is Jackie Eves, and I've been a member of St. Paul for some time. And for approximately 55 years. And I've pondered what I could say to you that could express how I really feel about St. Paul. And actually, I have not found words that were adequate. So what I can say is that St. Paul is a small church with a huge impact. Now let me explain. And I've written a few comments, so I won't look up when I talk all the time. During the years that I've been a member, I have seen St. Paul evolve to meet the challenges of the present age with love and sharing, while remaining true to its commitment of redeeming souls and preserving its tradition. St. Paul has a reputation of training ministers. You see, you heard Reverend Richmond say he was young coming in, okay? We're often assigned a new pastor's first charge, and then, of course, they move on. Many return to visit, and some send their children to Virginia Tech. To date, many pastors pastor larger congregations, but you know, they never forget their first love, St. Paul. So during our 150 years, we've had many ups and downs, but through it all, God has directed our path. He's always had us in the hollow of his hands, from the first structure to the renovated ones, to the many members who are no longer with us, but their labor is not forgotten. To take the leadership during the civil rights era that Reverend Richmond talked about, even when it was unpopular. To our members and friends involved in civic organizations and working behind the scenes when issues had an impact on our community. Today, our commitment is still unwavering. Our members are leaders, and some are community activists. Our congregation is made up mostly of students. Because of this, it becomes St. Paul's mandate and obligation to provide guidance and some stability to those who become a part of our family. We believe in promoting their involvement and their training. These two elements can have an impact on their growth. We believe by doing these things, we have a hand in encouraging their future, encouraging them to be future leaders of organizations, company CEOs, ministers, and who knows, perhaps world leaders. We're growing, and we're looking forward to expanding. Our vision is to continue the dream of our forefathers. Remember, all of you are welcome to our house. Like Mrs. Berger said, there is no better place for you to be, not only on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at St. Paul.
All right. Thank you very much. And now that concludes our presentations, and we're open for questions.
Maybe you said this, but what year was the church built?
The deed that we have hanging on the wall is 1782, I believe. 1882. I believe the actual first deed was 1876, but the cornerstone says rebuilt in 1901. The actual, do you have the date of the first building, Jackie?
It says in the church basement, a deed dated September the 25th, 1882 details the transaction. I'll go on to that part. Then the St. Paul African Methodist Episcopal Church was founded in 1857. And it says it stands on its original stand. And the land itself was purchased for $30. But we don't have, there is a book that I have not been able to locate that gives that detailed information. And we are trying to find it.
I know that, when they had the tours of the original area, that was on the historical record.
Yeah, I believe 1876 was the date it was originally purchased.
What I've heard tonight, you have such a rich tradition, but I wonder, how do you bring the students who probably come and stay maybe 4 years and leave again, how do you bring them into this tradition, the newcomers and maybe the more transient population? What kinds of programs and all do you do?
Yeah, I was hoping that maybe some of our members would respond from the floor, and so I'm going to just see if anybody from the floor wants to just say what it is about St. Paul that is. There you go.
Hi, I'm Jonathan. I came like 10 years ago, but one thing about I guess having traditions and and being A.M.E. and that everything's so structured. Structured, good word. Is you know, when you go to another A.M.E. church, it's kind of almost like being at home in a sense. So if you've already come from an A.M.E. church, you go to another A.M.E. church, you're pretty stable in that you know how the flow of the service is going to go. In a sense, of course, there's some variation, of course, depending on the people. The people make the church, but that tradition and that methodology actually helps bring a lot of stability to A.M.E. in general.
Yeah.
That's what I say.
And I imagine stability is pretty important when you're up here trying to go through school, finding an anchor in the storm, so to speak. Erica, all right.
Good evening. We also have a campus ministry on Virginia Tech's campus. Me and Eddie, we both founded the organization. Eddie's the president, and I'm the treasurer. He left, but we like to associate Tech students into St. Paul by inviting them to church and different activities that we may have. But we also have our campus ministry on campus every Thursday night at 7 o'clock just to introduce Tech students to what St. Paul is all about and about A.M.E. Just bringing them a fellowship aside from their regular church home.
And Lisa's about to take the mic. She might want to say something about our music ministry because that's part of what draws people.
Good evening. It is a wonderful opportunity, the music ministry, because one thing that St. Paul has always been good at, and you hear it in some of the traditions that you've heard, is accepting people where they are and encouraging them to do what it is that they do. So they are gracious in that acceptance, and that I've brought several kinds of instrument into the church, and even through that learning curve that's always present in the acquisition of a new instrument, the encouragement's always been there, the love's always been there, and the opportunity to do what it is that I do and is evident everywhere. One of the ways I think that St. Paul really draws in college students is that they're given that space. Not unreservedly, they don't run willy-nilly throughout the church, but they're given opportunity, they're given help, and they can reach out and draw others with those same kind of opportunities.
I also came to St. Paul as a student, and one of the biggest things that Lisa said, was love and encouragement. Good food is also a part of it. That you get the college students in. I mean, it's been a tradition that you can regularly find a good home cooked meal at St. Paul, and just like I said, the love is there, and you get spiritual food, you get the physical food, and it's really like you said, stability. Just it's a family type feel. That you feel it the first day. My very first day in St. Paul, I got a hug from everybody in the church. Yeah. And I'd never been to a church like that, where, everybody in the church gave me a hug on that Sunday. And it was almost like, at first, I felt bad, maybe if I didn't come back, just that thing. But, we continue to come, and, we're still in school. John and I actually met at St. Paul, so, our family began at St. Paul. Just, a lot, is there. But, how do you get the young folks involved? Is, a lot of love and, free food.
What time are your services on Sunday?
10:30.
Sunday school?
Sunday school, 9:30.
Reverend Nora, you mentioned that you grew up sort of in the Baptist tradition. And I'm wondering, with bringing students in from Virginia Tech, and maybe some folks out here can comment too, are a lot of the individuals that come to your church, do they come from the A.M.E. tradition, or do they come from other denominations?
Almost no one comes from A.M.E. We get a few every now and then, but most come from other denominations, actually.
You were founded in 1857 before emancipation. What was the status of the founders?
Yeah, well, that's where I said we have very little detailed information. Actually, you know, that's why I read the Richard Allen piece, because that's 1786, 1787. He actually said 86 in this piece, but the idea was, yeah, the church started way before emancipation, and so there were a lot of issues involved. There was a Supreme Court case involved. In fact, because you had in the North, you had laws that allowed for freedom and property ownership and things of that nature. But we don't have those kind of details about what went on right here in that time.
It was like in most places in those days, historical days, the blacks were privileged to meet together sometimes. And sometimes if their owners, if they were slaves back in those days, they were sometimes very skeptical about meeting different places. We have a lot of Negro spirituals like still away to Jesus. There was a code that they had in those days that they were going to steal away at the midnight hours and go somewhere and pray together. They had a lot of songs that they could sing together that was really songs of communication. So in some areas they met freely. In other areas they did not meet. Now when Richard Allen and those came out in Philadelphia in 1787, they were free to meet. But they just continued to grow, and more people came in and got more privileges, and until after a while people didn't think anything about their meeting together.
I would add also the history in the journal about the Methodist Church here in Blacksburg shows the official recognition of St. Paul as 1867. And I think that too has something to do with laws at the time as far as what could be acknowledged and what couldn't be acknowledged. But just as Richard Allen counts the beginning as when they walked out, we count the beginning as whenever they say they started. Any others? I think we're almost, yeah, okay.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm a student at Virginia Tech, and I'm involved with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. I was just wondering, I know that you guys have started a campus ministry. Is there any other history, though, of campus involvement before this happened?
We just started that last fall, was it? Yeah. So was there a campus ministry before?
No, we had the Spirit of Agape. That was a group that was on campus, but they were a choir group. And in order to be affiliated with the campus, they had to have somebody, and they were part of our church. That was it, nothing else.
It's a little bit of history. When I came here as student pastor, there weren't any black students at VPI. During my time here, 2 students did start. Charlie Yates, that some of you might have known, and Pedro, boy from Hampton, Virginia. But there weren't any students at VPI at all in those days. Our people, which was a large number, we had a very good population of black people during my time here from 1952 until 1963. And they came from different sections. Some lived outside of the city, and some lived on either side of the town. But life was kind of dull in those days because you didn't have the opportunities. You couldn't go on the campus. You didn't have the facilities that you have now and that you had even when I left. When I left in 1963, things had begun to really open, and it was a joy place to live, where people were working together, praying together, working together, job opportunities. But in those early days of my ministry here, you just kind of confined and felt like you were isolated, ostracized. But thank God, as time went on, the role and the vision that the people had at St. Paul began to unfold, and just like a play, year after year, things began to happen. And people rejoiced together. And it was a beautiful community in which to live after things had begun to happen. And the people were kind and congenial, except there was some strict segregationists that took a long time to get over it, the changes. But it was a good life when I left here in 1963.
All right, thank you.
I have a question and first a comment. I really want to congratulate all of you on your history and your steadfastness and your resolve and the progress that you have made. And I have a question. And there was a 1866-67. There was an A.M.E. congregation formed at Wake Forest, and I came across a deed for that. In fact, one of the trustees was Mr. Lewis Eves, and two other gentlemen. But that congregation seemed to have just disappeared, and I was wondering if in your traditions and in talking with your elders, especially Reverend Richmond, did you come across any clue as to what might have happened to that early congregation, because they were formed by the freedmen who came in from Kentland Plantation down by the river. And so it's essentially a lost congregation. Do you have any knowledge of that? And could your roots be somewhat formed in that?
I didn't have any knowledge of it when I was here. I didn't hear about it, but I'm sure it happened, just like a lot of places, because there were churches, one in Pulaski, there's one in Salem, Virginia. You have 3 in Roanoke, you don't have any in Salem, Virginia. But I think what happened in those days, once the opportunity for a lot of churches began to organize, the smaller groups didn't always see the need for staying together just as a few people, and they began to integrate with other Baptists or any denomination was there who was given the kind of community and religious services that met their needs. So that's interesting to know, and it'd be good somewhere in our research to even make note of that and write about it, because it is a good record to keep. Thank you, sir, for sharing that.
I do have, I recently received some information from from Nashville about the first, I think it was the 3rd or 4th session of the Virginia Annual Conference, and it did say Wake Forest. But after that, no other pastor was assigned to Wake Forest. So evidently, just like Reverend Richmond has said, that church was just dissolved and the congregation went to other churches, the same as in Pulaski and Whitfield as well.
Fortunately, St. Paul has been a very progressive church in a way, because we entertained the mid-year conference here, Reverend Gore, when I was here as pastor. In the Methodist Church, you have annual conference, and then in our denomination, part of the Methodism, you have mid-year conference. And we had a mid-year conference when people came here, pastors and the bishop came from all over the state of Virginia. It was a great thing for us to entertain the mid-year conference. And we thought we were somebody entertaining the mid-year conference. And we were wonderful hosts, and they had a good time while they were here, and some of them didn't even want to leave. But we rushed them out of town very quickly. But Blacksburg has had a continuous history and strength. I know after I left, we had a couple of persons here for a short time. Then you had another person, Reverend James Beatty, who was here for a long time. But I think, and then for a long time, pastors would come in on weekends. I guess Reverend Orr is the only one who's come here to stay continuously in a long time. But through it all, the church here, St. Paul, has made progress over the years, and they have had quite a few, as I talk with other pastors in between, who have had administrators from the campus who worshiped with them and took very active part in the church, as well as students. there's a lot of instructors have come and gone. Of course, instructors just are like students. They may be here for a few years and then gone. There's students here for a few years and gone. But they've had a lot of instructors on the campus involved as well over the years. Been talking with some of the previous pastors who were here, maybe not as long as I've stayed here, but they were here for a while. Just let me tell you, this is Hurry. When I came here, we had a Pot Brothers bedded stove over in the parsonage. Had a parsonage out in Gilbert Street, and didn't have very many facilities. I stayed with a lady when I first came here who lived together 104 years old, Mrs. Laura Anderson. I stayed with her for a short while, but she gave me the history of everybody all the way back to full slavery time. And she was a beautiful person. We loved her, and she lived long, long after I left here. It was quite a historic person for this community and for the St. Paul A.M.E. Church.
The pastors that I know of, I know them all from years back. My first pastor was, of course, Reverend Caldwell. And then we had I might not have them in right in sequence, but we had Reverend Caldwell, Reverend Scott, Reverend Gray, Reverend Woods, Reverend Allen, Reverend Richmond, Reverend Walker, Reverend Turner, Reverend Freeman, and our current pastor, Reverend Noah. That's the pastors that, I don't know if I left out any or not.
Miss Reverend Beatty.
And Reverend Beatty, yeah, I got Beatty on here too. Reverend Beatty, he was here about, what, 13 years.
There are quite a few more, but I don't remember all their names. I don't have them in front of me because we had them at one time when they were just a year after a year, every year until somebody decided to stay for a while, you know. And that causes people to leave because those people, for instance, if you're a student, you want some stability, and you have somebody who's your leader and they leave, people leave because the pastor leaves, because they were about the pastor, not about the church. And that in itself causes churches to fall apart. And so when you see that, and then the older members of our church who are all gone, I think Mrs. Berger and I are probably the oldest. We have maybe Connie, who've been there forever, you know. She's not old, please, Connie's not old. I'm just saying she's been here a while. I'm sorry, Connie. And so, but I'm saying, you know, we have the steadfastness to stay because we're here. But those who do not have that, until we're able to make sure that they're about the church and not about the pastor, then people will stay.
Yeah, I think the point Reverend Richmond made was very important. There's been a tremendous drop in black population in this area too. So, the record shows it was over 17% at one time, and we're around 4 or 5 now or something like that. I think you have another question.
My question is just concerns the 16 squares of Blacksburg, and do you have any idea, do you have a record of how you acquired that property there for the church and the families that lived around the church area there when it was originally built?
We have the names on the deed as far as who sold it, who purchased it. Did you have that with you, Jackie?
Yes.
Okay. She's looking that up. The George Washington and his wife Ann Washington, and that's true. That's who it is. I know it comes out like, come on, you know, George Washington and his wife Ann Washington.
That wasn't the president.
And our trustees at the time, we had Miss Laura Lee Anderson was our secretary, John Smith, Spencer Johnson, Henry Vaughn, Lewis Lewis, and George Washington. So. Any others?
Okay, I rise to say that I don't have a question which I just want to clear up a little about the barber up there. I'm a 4th generation from the Kent farm down at Whitethorn. And I've lived in and out of Blacksburg all my life. My mother worked here, and she had a live-in job, so I was in and out. But my involvement came, a lot of people ask me, did I work in the shop you had mentioned, Mr. Sears and so forth. I never worked in there. I came out from Korea in '55, and the black students were here, and the black folks needed a haircut. And I was trained at Christiansburg Institute as a barber, so they knew, and so I was going from door to door cutting hair. They didn't employ me at the shop you're talking about. It was down on College Avenue, because my association with the cutting black people's hair, they thought if I went to work down there, I would bring the black clientele down there. And they felt that if the black clientele were there, they would lose the white clientele. So in my association of cutting the hair, I cut a shoeshine boy's hair off campus, and he went back to work the next day, and they sort of dissected my haircut, and they thought that, then they told him, say, if he can cut your hair, he can cut anybody's hair down. So they sent for me to come down. I went down. This is 1956. So they gave me a job that August of '56, and I've been barbering in Blacksburg ever since. I just celebrated my 50th year last year. So I'm still here.